the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be. Join the community, come and see. Expats, Portugal.
Discovering Lisbon's past, what every newcomer should know about Portugal's capital. We're going to step into the city and the country, of course, with new eyes and connect with life in Portugal with Ana Fernandes Pinto, who's here with us from Culture in Translation, inviting us to explore the fascinating journey of Portugal's capital, from the moment the country's borders were first defined to Lisbon's rise as a pioneering centre of maritime exploration. This isn't just a history lesson, however. When you understand the stories and references that locals grew up with, conversations start to take on a new meaning. This deeper awareness helps you connect more naturally with the people around you and feel part of the city rather than just a visitor passing through. And I think this is going to give you value wherever you choose to live or visit in Portugal. And I'm delighted to welcome to our webinar this evening, Ana Fernandes Pinto. Ana, good evening to you. Muito prazer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. It's very interesting, and I'm very thankful to this opportunity to talk about history of Portugal and the city of Lisbon, because as someone who from Lisbon, I have witnessed the city's transformation at first hand, and became very popular. Lisbon became a very popular destiny and a very desirable choice for expats. So your interest in our history and your interest in Portuguese tradition, it's very significant to us as Portuguese, because for the Portuguese people and to the people of Lisbon in particular. So thank you so much to being here today.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing in this way. So you are an authentic Alfacina, are you?
Yes.
Okay.
I only left Lisbon for a year when I lived in Cambridge, as I was saying to you. So
wow.
I'm lived the entire life here. I love to travel, but I'm from here. I'm Ana Fernandes Pinto. I have a PhD in history, and I'm the founder of this project, Culture in Translation, that is a brand that promotes Lisbon culture through history, heritage, and art. And you can follow my activity and our proposal and the knowledge through in Instagram. And today I will give you a glimpse of Lisbon history, and I will explain two major events that gave the uniqueness of Lisbon, in my opinion. So I will start with a very recent edition, the Asterix in Lusitania, that is focused mainly, the action take place in Lisbon, as you can see here. This Olisipo, it's the very old name of Lisbon. And in this edition, it's very interesting. Well, in this Asterix edition, it's very interesting to see the way the others see us and what others say about us. And it's very interesting because how they perceive us and how the characteristics that highlight. And in Asterix, Lusitania, it's presented as, even that you don't know Portuguese, you can catch these words that are depicting here: azulejos, that are tiles, and bacalhau, that is cod fish. So Lusitania is presented as the land of tiles and codfish, and also fado. Well, codfish, those who lived here know that the Portuguese culinary states that can make 1,000 recipes with codfish. So codfish is with no doubt a very popular raw material for the Portuguese. And also fado. We know that fado, it's a music genre born in Lisbon that became one of the most representative cultural expression of Portuguese people. There are the Portuguese fado, actually the fado born in Lisbon, but there is also the Coimbra fado. That is, it can be more mourning than the Lisbon one. And you see Asterix just crying because it's a very melancholy song. And tiles, although not of Portuguese origin, it's perhaps the only artistic expression that is immediately associated with Portugal. Tiles are hugely successful in Portugal due to their low production cost, due to the materials adaptability to Portuguese climate, and due to their enormous decorative potential. And let you show you this more focus in close picture, and because these pictures that shows the unique characteristics that tiles took in Portugal. As you can see, tiles integrate the architecture, they interact with the architecture, and as you can see, transform the space. And it was also a very specific feature of Portuguese tiles is the fact that tiles also not only interact with architecture, but also interact with other art. For example, in this panel, that is one of the most famous in Portugal, in this pattern, it's called the diamond point. And the diamond point, it's a pattern that it's inspiring jewelry. So it's a very rich cultural and artistic expression in Portugal. And tiles, fado, codfish in a lesser way, but tiles and fado are two elements that are always present in discussions about Portuguese identity, and both are considered of being Portuguese, by us too. So depicting the Portuguese as people, as it is in Asterix, as people of fado and leisure is not a caricature. We see ourselves in that way. Well, but if that's common features, what are the uniqueness of Lisbon? What makes Lisbon different and unique? Well, first of all, Lisbon, it's a city of overlapping civilizations and layers of cultures. And Lisbon is one of the oldest urban centers in Europe. Lisbon history has a settlement is old as history can go. The beginnings of the city date back between the 5th century before Christ, when Phoenician communities settled here. They settled in this hill where is the castle. And there are vestiges, archaeological vestiges that testifies it. And Lisbon developed its position and consolidated his position as urban settlement because it lies in the mouth of the Tagus River. The Tagus River offers conditions, the best conditions for navigation, for moorings, and its location, it's great, has a port, and that explains not only the beginnings of Lisbon history, but explains also a very specific characteristics of Lisbon, that is the fact that it's a place of confluence. The Tagus, it's a gateway in both sense. Other factor that explains the beginnings, well, this one, sorry, that explains the geographic location. So geographic location explains Lisbon longevity, but there are other factors. Climate, that we spoke in the beginning where we were offline, the mild climate, that it's great, the fact of being a windy city, and that's a very important factor to explain the longevity of Lisbon, because wind cleans the air. And that avoid the spread of illness. And in times where no one took bath, that was very important. And we recently had a very vivid experience of the importance of air circulation as health measure with the pandemics, COVID pandemics. And I could refer other features, but these ones, the location, the geographic location, and the climates are the two main features that explain the longevity of Lisbon. So the beginning of Lisbon occupation dates back, as I was saying, from the times of the Phoenicians, where some communities settled here. They had a cemetery, so they lived here. And then came the Romans. And in the time of the Roman Empire, Lisbon became very important because it was an essential source of garum production. And garum, it's a salty liquor that smells awfully. And it depicted in Asterix in Lusitania. And garum production, it can be said that became an industrial, it gained industrial scale in the time of the Romans. Then, with the decay of the Roman Empire, Visigoths settled in these areas and the Visigoths were Christians. So Christianity entered in the Iberia Peninsula. And then we have the Islamic occupation. And the Islamic occupation of the Iberian Peninsula dates from the 8th century, now in this area, 8th century of this area. And initially, the Islamic occupation, well, there was a political change, of course, but with minimal repercussions. Islam took root among a population that continued to practice Roman Christianity, and Christian population coexists with Islamic population and without major problems. Actually, at that time, Lisbon was not a priority for the most important Islamic centers, but the Islamic presence was felt and is still in Lisbon, as you can see in this image. They shaped Islamics shape Lisbon urban settlement. In which way? Well, narrow streets, and you can see from this image that is really, really narrow. So people from both the windows of both sides can just give hand to hand. So very narrow streets, labyrinthic, circular, winding streets, narrow alleys, blind alleys, all these elements that you can still feel and visualize in Lisbon are features that came with Islam. Also, the wall that we still have some vestige nowadays is something that came with Islamic power. And it's a reality from the 10th century, when the Almoravid and then Almohaden empires, Islamic empires, conquered Lisbon, and they felt the need to rebuild and reconstruction a huge wall. As you can see in this model, the yellow line, it's the wall that in parts they rebuilt, in parts they construct. And this area, the new wall covered around 15 hectares, so very small city, and had a kind of no more than 1 kilometer of perimeter. And then Lisbon became once more Christian. In 1147, Lisbon was conquered by our first king, Afonso Henriques, and Lisbon became under the control of Portugal, a country that was still being formed. The sea cathedral that you see in this image was built at that time. It was a promise of Afonso Henriques, but it is important to state that this was not the first Christian building in town, but this one is a statement, is a political statement, and it's a landmark of Christianity in Lisbon. It's the sea cathedral. But the Christian legacy, it's much more vast than the sea cathedral, even nowadays. One of the most visible legacies is in the symbol of the city itself, in this depiction of a boat and crows that everybody connects to Lisbon. And these depictions are linked to Catholic devotion. Now, how and why? Because Afonso Henriques, our first king, had promised that if Lisbon were conquered to the Islam power, he would order, and see the connection with political power and Catholic faith, he would rescue the relics of Saint Vincent, the priest that was one of the first preach fathers of the church. And the relics of Saint Vincent were hidden at Cape Saint Vincent, nowadays Sagres, and it was hidden since the time when the Islamics had invaded the Iberian Peninsula. And so we conquered Lisbon, and so we did rescue the relics of Saint Vincent. And according to the legend, these relics were transported from the Cape Saint Vincent at Sagres by boat, and the boat was guarded through the journey by two crows. And the relics arrived to Lisbon, and Saint Vincent became the patron of Lisbon, and the boat and the crows became a symbol of Lisbon. And you may thinking, what? Saint Vincent is the patron of Lisbon? So what about Saint Antonio, Saint Anthony? Well, Saint Anthony actually is not the patron of Lisbon, but is the most famous and devoted saint in Lisbon. Saint Anthony, Saint Antonio, and I can't say it in English because it's so powerful, the name of the saint, Saint Antonio, born in Lisbon. He lived here for 31 years, not actually here because his missionary activity led to other parts of Portugal, even to North Africa, and he ended his life in Padua. And that's why there's this discussion, this contest, who belongs Saint Antonio, to Lisbon or to Padua? Well, nevertheless, it belongs to Lisbon, for sure. Because it's undoubtedly the most beloved and popular saint among Lisbon residents, and Lisbon is full of reference to Saint Antonio. And here you can see the procession. There's lots of festivities in his honor, and all that festivities brings the city to a standstill. So we have the procession, we have a holiday that it's the 3rd of June, the date of Saint Antonio's death, and it's a public holiday in Lisbon, and everybody goes out to eat sardines, dance, go to the popular march and eating. So it's our saint, poor Saint Vincent, that was brought to Lisbon and is almost forgotten. Well, this is a brief chronology of Lisbon history. It's a city of overlapping civilizations, layers of cultures, but again, this is something that is common to a lot of cities in Europe. What makes Lisbon a unique city? And there are two moments in history when Lisbon was at the center of European history, with impact on politics and economics, social life, urban development. And that's why, and that is these two moments that make Lisbon so unique. And these moments are first in the 16th century, when the Portuguese start their maritime overseas expansion, and in that time, Lisbon became the platform of a first-time globalized world. And the second moment is in the 18th century, when Lisbon was devastated by a huge earthquake, which led to fundamental advance in scientific knowledge. So let's have a look in these two moments and how they can be visualized nowadays in Lisbon. Well, before the maritime expansion, the Portuguese maritime experience was limited to commercial activity in the Mediterranean and the northeastern Europe countries. And the experience was limited also to fishing and some piracy. The reason that led the Portuguese to become interested in maritime expansion, it's a very long story, but to put it briefly, the main cause was to evade the problems with Europe and to avoid wars with Spain. And so Portuguese decided to focus in the exploration of North Africa first and the exploration of West Coast Africa. And Portuguese made huge advance into Atlantic. And that was actually, they found the limit of the continent of Africa. And that was only possible thanks to the practice of navigation, thanks to the development of scientific knowledge to overcome these difficulties posed by winds, by sea currents, by the navigation in the South Hemisphere. So Portuguese developed their own vessels. They were pioneers in astronomical navigation, and they were responsible for mapping the world and the oceans, most of the oceans. And in the image, what we see is the previous location of the main Portuguese shipyards located in the rear of the royal palace. And this location is very important because the king himself was side by side with the shipyards, because the king himself was committed with overseas explorations. And here is a map of the world, and all the places, most of the places named here are were places where the Portuguese settled. So Portuguese Empire in Asia was not a colonial empire, and the colonial empire was only in Brazil and some parts of Africa, in Angola, mainly in Angola. And in this empire, Lisbon was the center. Lisbon was the axis of this traffic, and Lisbon was the infrastructure for the organization, providing ships, providing military support, providing food. So it was a rotating platform of people, of goods that came all over the world. And that makes Lisbon unique, because Lisbon became a place of diversity, of cultural diversity, of diversity of ethnic groups. And as the Portuguese network, commercial network expand, Lisbon became increasingly more mixed, more cosmopolitan, and where people from all over the world converge. And that is very important. And that makes a specific mark in Lisbon. And Lisbon, it's not only a platform of goods and people, it's also a platform, it's a shopping center, became a shopping center. Many objects that nowadays we found in national museums were purchased in distant markets to be acquired by European elites. So they came from Asia and Brazil to be sold to European elites. And I'm speaking about pepper, it's the most well-known, but I could speak about furniture, porcelain, precious stones, exotic, like these pieces that it's made of coconuts, and because no one knew coconuts at that time, so they imported that they were mounted in silver constructions. So the exotic, and also animals that Europe haven't seen or could imagine. And the best example, if it's a rhinoceros that it was the first time seen in the 16th century in Lisbon.
Wow.
Well, when the animal arrived in Lisbon was resounding, because it was never sight. It was believed that this kind of animals with a unicorn was an imaginary creature. And the impact was so great that at the time when the rhinoceros disembarked in Lisbon, it was a gift by the Sultan of India to the King of Portugal. So when the rhinoceros disembarked in Lisbon, it was a time where Torre de Belém was being built. And the architect was so impressed that he did not hesitate to sculpture the animal in the tower. And this is a symbol of Lisbon prestige. This is a symbol of this platform, this capacity of Lisbon to be an interface. Another example of the same rhinoceros that circulated all over Europe is this depiction done by Dürer. So you can have a glimpse of the impact of Lisbon as a global center. So Dürer received a letter where this rhinoceros that disembarked in Lisbon was depicted. And according to the description, he made this engraving that circulated all over Europe. And this image, engraved by Dürer, it's a distorted image of a rhinoceros, with no doubt for us today. But this illustration was kept and appeared in books of natural science until the 19th century, when Europeans once again were entering and were in their own colonial process and saw the rhinoceros alive in their natural habitat. And so this is one very specific impact of this of Lisbon as a global city. But what is important here is that Lisbon became accustomed to the diversity, and Lisbon people became very open to transfer knowledge. And I think that explains, in a certain extent, our features as Portuguese, that we love to travel, we love to receive foreigners, and we love to listen the others and learn with the others. I think that it came from this time. And the city architecture was very expressive of this cosmopolitanism and wealth. But most of this heritage was destroyed with the 1755 earthquake, because in the 1st of November of 1755, an extremely violent earthquake shook Lisbon, destroyed Lisbon. There was the earthquake. Seismologists think that it was like scale 9, very similar to what happened in Fukushima in Japan in 2011. So the same kind of intensity that is huge. It was very length, like 7 minutes shaking. Then was followed by a tsunami, and there's no certainty but about the number of waves, but between 3-5 gigantic waves. And then, last but not least, Lisbon was devastated by fires that outbreak all over the town. At that time, Lisbon was one of the 8 largest cities in the world, not in Europe, in the world. So we are considering India and China, that forever where the most population forever has been concentrated. And it is estimated that at that time Lisbon had around 200,000 inhabitants, and at least 10,000 died with the earthquake. What we see here, it's an imagined representation. Of course, the one who depicted this was not in Lisbon at that time. So what we see here, it's a representation of the earthquake that shocked Europe. The destruction was massive, and it estimated that around 85% of the buildings were destroyed. The royal palace and hundreds of works of art disappeared. The newly royal opera house that had opened 6 months earlier was totally destroyed. The royal library, around 70,000 volumes, came to ashes. The royal archive disappeared. So around 40 churches disappeared. So it was devastated for Lisbon, and it was an awful event for Portugal, the entire country himself, that became really, really poor. But the event it was so strong, it was so devastated, the earthquake, that the event had repercussions all over Europe. Here you can see an image of one of the biggest Gothic built church that we had in Lisbon, that was mostly destroyed. It's Convento do Carmo, and it was thought to rebuild, but it was impossible to rebuild this huge building and stay like it you can see today, only part ruins. Very beautiful, but well, ruins. But the event had repercussions all over Europe, and the first question that arose was, does the earthquake was a divine punishment? It's, for us, nowadays, it looks like a very rare question, but it makes a lot of sense, because Europe was a Catholic Europe, or well, a Christian Europe, not Catholic, because there's division between Catholics and Protestants, but a Christian Europe. So the question was very reasonable. And it was Voltaire, Rousseau, and Kant that reflect on the event and share their thoughts. And I say Kant was the most precious one in the understanding and in the interpretation of the earthquake. And Kant placed the interpretation of the earthquake in the domain of the natural order, and that was revolutionary. It is not known, he says, it is not known what caused it, the earthquake, but it's known that it was natural causes that were causes by nature. Nowadays, we look like to this sentence and say, oh, of course. But for the time, that was a revolutionary thought. Removing the meaning of divine punishment was a huge step in terms of construction of scientific knowledge. And it's and Kant was so impressed with this event that he wrote 3 books on the topic. And in one of the books, he makes this sentence that is very up to date, but it seems that very obvious to us, but it was revolutionary, considering that we were in the 18th century. And he says, it is man who has to learn to adapt to nature, but nevertheless, he wants her to adapt to him. And that's lovely. It's a lovely sentence that makes a huge sense even today. Well, but what happens beyond these philosophical considerations? What happens to Lisbon? Lisbon had to rebuild itself after what is considered, and it was actually the greatest blow of its existence. And it is very interesting to see that Portuguese were very responsive. And it's very interesting to see that in the second, so firstly, they were very responsiveness, and secondly, they were open-minded to accept innovation and in applying innovative solutions. So this is an image. What you see in the screen, it's an image of Lisbon before the earthquake. And you see, well, those who lived here or those who already visit Lisbon, you have in mind these two huge squares, Terreiro do Paço, Rocio. You have here the depiction of the castle. You have here the sea cathedral, so squares. You also have the royal palace in one of the frontiers of the Terreiro do Paço. But what stands out from this depiction is that Lisbon is a disorganized city. And this image, it's a very good depiction of the labyrinthic urban fabric of Lisbon of that time, that was a legacy of the medieval period from the Islamic occupation. And what happens after is that Lisbon had the capacity of the Portuguese, of Lisboetas, had the capacity to implement a rational city design plan according an octagonal plan, as you see in this image. And what we see here, and this octagonal plan was implemented in Baixa district, in downtown area, and it stands out for its innovation. And on this part of the image, you see the old part of the city, which was destroyed, but it was impossible to implement these new ideas in this area because this was a residential area and people need to rebuild their own houses in the way and according what they knew. So we have this huge contrast of a new medieval city and this very new idea, innovative plan. Baixa solution represents the first modern design in Western world. This is incredible and it's not very often divulgated, but it's the first modern design in Western world. It precedes a century the innovative solutions that we all know implemented in Paris by Baron Haussmann, that rebuilt and reconstructed a new Paris. So this solution was first implemented here in Lisbon a century before. And there are several innovative features that were implemented, such a design of wide streets. People at that time complain a lot. Why is this need of such wide streets? Because wide streets allowed the landslides in the event of another earthquake, or allows that the waves can sweep the area through the area with minimal devastation in case of another tsunami. But what deserves special mention, it's the so-called cage construction that I suppose that all of you have already heard about. And this cage construction that we say in Portuguese, gaiola, it's a model of anti-seismic system. It is the first of its kind in the world. And it's very interesting to understand that this solution was based on naval construction methods. So all our heritage and knowledge on shipyard, on construction of ships, were applied in a new system that there are lots of depictions say that it was test in Praça do Comércio. So lots of tentatives and errors to see if it works. It's very interesting, this feature of the Portuguese to learn through practice. And what is this cage? As you can see in the image, or you can have a glimpse, this is a structure, a wooden structure that make a three-dimensional structure that allows the distribution of seismic force. So all the building, in case of earthquake, all the building will move. And this structure is efficient if is the interior of the cage of this structure, it's filling with a mortar that is also flexible. And so that's why lots of people's, there's a lot of complaints when people decided to take the mortar from the inside of the structure and put their houses beautiful with this structure visible, but that without mortar, the structure is not efficient. Earthquakes are a permanent menace to the people of Lisbon. And for very long, we did not care. We did not understood the lesson. But nowadays, we are very, well, the authorities are very committed to make this awareness of the situation of might earthquake. So we have a lot of signposts that at the beginning no one understood the meaning of the signposts, but actually there are now lots of information what to do in case of an earthquake, because we know that will happen. We only don't know when. As in Japan. So this is very similar. So these two moments are, well, very key elements of that explain Lisbon uniqueness, because all these experience, the confluence of people and goods and ideas and knowledge for one hand, on the other hand, the necessity to deal with devastation and to implement innovative solutions make Lisbon a very unique city. So I would love to guide you if you decided to come to Lisbon, to see in place all the heritage that testifies this uniqueness of Lisbon, because today I only give you a glimpse of what all you can see. But even that you don't make a guide tour in Lisbon, now the next time you come to the city, I'm sure that we'll look to the town with different eyes and keeping in mind not only the layers of civilizations, but also all these two fundamental moments in Lisbon history that shaped the city.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I was about to jump in, Carl, but you...
Well, Storm Claudia deprived me. I have to watch the replay myself when it's published on Sunday, because I missed. I was reaching.
Oh, I speak too quickly. I'm sorry.
No. My internet cut out, so I was sat here on the edge of my seat, and then I was suddenly kicked out off the internet. So I will be going back to watch what happened in the formation of the new Lisbon after the earthquake. And I thank you so much, Anna. You're getting lots of lovely applause from our Expats Portugal premium members here tonight, who I'm sure have a few questions for you.
Yes, please.
So let's go to those. Thank you so much, muito obrigado, for your lovely presentation and your insight. And you're absolutely right. I think everyone who goes to Lisbon now will see things and remember you from this talk this evening. I certainly will. The ship with the two crows, for example, and the layout of the streets. We'll be thinking of you when we go to the capital. So I'm going to pause the recording there for YouTube, and we'll go to questions from our Expats Portugal premium members Make sure you sign up and join us at expatsportugal.com if you want to hang out with fascinating guests like Anna. And stay tuned, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Us Expats Portugal Premium members are going to hang out with Anna now and have a bit of a Q&A session. So thank you very much indeed.
Looking for a place to call your own, where the sun shines bright and the seeds are sown. Portugal, it's the place to be.